It's happening. I don't care what anybody says. It's fall. I woke up this morning and it was 49 degrees outside and all of my windows were open and I was freezing, but I was also so happy because I put on a big chunky sweater, put on my slippers, I got a heated blanket, and I curled up on the couch and I started reading. There were fall candles burning. I got apple orchard over there. I got twilight bonfire over there. I got some sort of like autumn moon over there. It's fall and I'm so excited about it, as I know a lot of people are. This is my favorite time to read. I love reading fall books or just any books in the fall. Everything feels so cozy. Everything feels very festive, even more so than the winter. It just feels amazing. I've got the fall sweater on and we're ready to go. So I wanted to talk today about some of the books that are on my fall TBR. These are new releases, but also books that I've had on my TBR shelf for a long time that I just have never gone around to reading, or I will always want to save them for the fall specifically. And then I have so many books that I want to read in the fall that they just keep getting pushed back on the list. And then I'm like, well, I guess now I have to wait until next fall to read it. So there's a couple of those on there. There's a couple new releases. The genres that I always gravitate to in the fall are definitely fantasy. Even though I read fantasy year round, it's my favorite genre. There's something about reading it in the fall that always feels really cozy to me. So I have some fantasy books on here. Classically, I typically read mystery in the fall, even though I'm not a huge mystery person. That's kind of the time that I really give it a good shot because it just feels like spooky season. Halloween books, murder mysteries are super fun. Cozy fantasy, I always associate with reading in the fall as well, so I have some of that on there. Dark academia is hugely popular to read in the fall, and I love the subgenre of dark academia, so I have a couple of those books on there as well. So there's a lot that I want to get through and talk about. I definitely want to hear what's on your guys' fall TBR, so drop those in the comments before we get started, and let's dive into our first book. No surprise, I have had Ninth House on my TBR for years. Let's see, it shows it on the back of the book. I got this from Book of the Month in November of 2019, and I've always wanted to read it, and this is one of the books that I say I want to read in the fall. I specifically want to read in the fall, and then I never do, and then I have to wait until the next fall to see if this is going to be the year, and I am going to force myself to read this book this year. This has to happen. This cyclical pattern of saying I want to read it every single year and never getting around to it, it has to end, and it's going to happen this time. So this is considered a dark academia book, but it's also got a little bit of fantasy and mystery thrown in there as well. I think dark academia is all encompassing, honestly. Any book can be dark academia if it takes place in the setting of maybe a dark academia. It's kind of vibey, atmospheric, spooky, moody, but takes place in like a college or a school or somewhere in academia. That's this book. This follows our main character, Alex. Actually, her first name is Galaxy, but she goes by Alex, and she joins Yale's freshman class. She comes from a really terrible background where she's involved with like dead-end jobs, drug dealer boyfriends, and one day she's in the hospital after surviving a multiple homicide. And I don't know why, but she suddenly gets this opportunity to go to Yale for free. And so she goes to Yale and she gets swept up in this secret society where there's like ghosts and magic and spooky things going on. Yale has the secret society, the Ninth House, and Alex kind of joins it. And she's there to monitor the secret societies of Yale and kind of monitor the dark magic that they're all working in. And then she starts to go deeper into things and learn all of these secrets. And then I don't know what happens, but things happen. And I'm really excited to read this. I know you probably don't believe me because I've had this on my shelf for 6 years and still haven't read it, but I am excited to read it. And like I said, this is gonna be the year. I think I'm probably gonna read this sometime in October when it's really, really feeling like spooky season, because I've heard this one gets a little bit dark, a little bit scary, but in a fun way. There is a second book and I think even a third book either coming out, or she hasn't written the third book yet and it's not out yet. The second book is called Hellbent. There is a lot of discourse on whether or not to continue with the rest of the series after Ninth House. A lot of people say to just stop at Ninth House. I don't think that you can really make that decision unless you read the full series. So if the third book isn't out yet, I don't know necessarily how I feel about that, but a lot of people don't really like Hellbent. But then there are some people that say Hellbent is better than Ninth House. So it is heavily discussed in my comments specifically. I think I've asked you guys about it before because I've just seen so much discourse about it. So I'm going to start with Ninth House, see how I feel feel. I don't know if I will be itching to pick up the second book necessarily this fall. I just want to get past the first one, please God. So we'll kind of see what happens, but I can't wait to read this one. This is going to be a perfect fall book. Next book that I really want to start this fall is actually a series, and it is An Ember in the Ashes. So I've talked about this series before. I've actually read An Ember in the Ashes, but I haven't read any of the other books in the series. I read this book when it first came out, or maybe like a year after it came out in 2016 or something, and I absolutely loved it. This is a young adult fantasy series, and it follows our main character Leia, who is a slave kind of turned spy rebel. The world that we're in is inspired by ancient Rome, and it's very like dictatorship. It's kind of oppressive and hard to live in unless you fall into a certain category of people, and Leia doesn't fall into that category, so she's a slave, she's a rebel, and she kind of falls into this crowd to become a spy. It also follows another character named Elias, who is a soldier for this nation's army, but he's kind of reluctant and doesn't really agree with a lot that's going on, and their paths start to cross. And Elias is just this good soldier, does what he's told, follows orders, and Leia is like, what are you doing? This is an oppressive society. We can't do, like, we have to fight back. And I just remember that being a really fun dynamic, and I really liked how interesting the world building was in this book. I'm so excited to read this. The reason that I never continued on with the series is because when I initially read An Ember in the Ashes, the next books were not out yet, and I had to wait like a year and a half for book 2 to come out, and I just lost steam, and I was reading other things, and I didn't feel like I wanted to read it at the time, especially knowing that I had to wait for book 3 to come out and book 4 to come out. So I kind of just made the decision of once every book is out, I will binge the series. That's how I prefer to read series anyway, because I feel like I can just capitalize on the momentum that I'm already feeling. But then once all 4 books came out, I still never ended up going back to the series, even though I really wanted to. The thing that really made me go back to the series was these new covers. She released these new covers, I think maybe last year or maybe 6 months ago or something, and I absolutely love them. I'll show you probably in another video, but you can see on the spine here, all 4 books' spines match up in a really cool design, and I just think that the covers are so cool, and that is what made me buy the rest of the series and want to restart it. So it's a fantasy series. I'm excited to dive into that this fall and potentially have like a really good series to lock onto for the colder months. I thought maybe my fantasy series of the fall was going to be the Poppy War, and I decided I need a little break before I start reading those other books. So I might do An Ember in the Ashes first and then see how I feel about the Poppy War. Another book that I'm really excited to read this fall that I was so close to reading last year and then just ran out of time, and we had transitioned into winter at that point, it's The Spell Shop. So I actually brought this with me on a couple fall trips that I had last year to read because it was just the perfect time to read it. And I was just reading other things and I ran out of time, and everybody in the comments unanimously was like, you have to read The Spell Shop in the fall. It is the fall book. So I didn't read it the rest of the year and haven't read it up to this point. So I'm gonna give it a shot this fall to try and read this book. This is cozy fantasy, I think. This got really, really popular last year. I think it's also a little bit of a dividing book. I think some people really love it and some people really hate it. So I'm excited to see what side of the line I fall on. So it follows our main character, Keela, who is a librarian at the Great Library of Elysium, and her assistant is a sentient spider plant. I guess that's literally a character in this book, is her sentient spider plant named Kaz. At one point, a revolution begins, and the entire library that Keela works in goes up in flames. She's able to save her spider plant, Kaz, and they flee with all of the spell books that they can carry, and they head back to Keela's childhood home. I'm just reading the synopsis here. I haven't read it in a while. So she's on her childhood home and she has all these spell books, and now in need of income, Keela identifies something that even the bakery in town doesn't have: jam. With the help of an old recipe book her parents left her and a bit of illegal magic, her cottage garden is soon covered in ripe berries. So Keela risks the consequences of using unsanctioned spells and opens the island's first ever and much needed secret spell shop, probably using a lot of the books that she stole from the library as it was being burned in this revolution. Honestly, the plot sounds very complicated when you just read the book jacket synopsis, but I think that this is a very simple, slow, cozy fantasy book. So even though it sounds complicated, I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting it to be a really easy and sweet read. I know some people don't really like the cozy fantasy genre and think it's a little bit of a waste of time, but I personally love it. I think it's really sweet, and I'm all about a cozy book, especially when it's coupled with fantasy. So I'm really excited to read this fall, especially because everybody really does say that this is a quintessential fall book. You have to read this in fall. So I think that this will be really fun to read when the leaves truly start changing and things start getting a lot colder. I also have None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell on this list. I have not read any of Lisa Jewell's books, but a lot of people have recommended her as an author to me, especially None of This Is True, just because I've talked a lot about with you guys my struggle with mystery books and how I just haven't really been enjoying them, but I really want to find mystery books that I enjoy. And this book and this author particularly has come up quite a few times. I think reading mystery books or mystery thriller books or murder mystery books in the fall really connects with me a little bit deeper, just because it's spooky season and I want to feel a little bit festive with a mystery book. So I did want to include this one on the list, especially because it's been recommended to me so many times. This one says, when a famous podcaster interviews a stranger promising to divulge the story of a lifetime, secrets emerge that threaten to expose the truth of the lives they both worked hard to project and protect. So our two main characters in this are Alex and Josie, and they're both 45, and they bump into each other on their birthdays one night and realize that they have the same birthday and that they are birthday twins. And then they kind of keep bumping into each other after a while. Alex is the podcaster who's kind of like a celebrity podcaster. She's sort of a big deal in the podcast space. And Josie goes up to Alex and is like, I've been listening to your podcast. I think it's really great. I have a story for you that I think would be really interesting. And so they do this podcast together. And as Josie is unraveling this crazy story that I know nothing about, I think that it kind of throws Alex into a really crazy world of secrets and lies and this like tangled web of chaos that puts her in danger, puts Josie in danger. And it sounds like it's just kind of your classic run-of-the-mill mystery there. I really want to go into this one pretty blind, if I'm being honest, because I think I have a better chance of enjoying a mystery if I have little to no expectations. So I didn't even read the full jacket synopsis. I just kind of read a little bit that I shared with you. And I'm going to try to go into this one pretty blind, just knowing the very, very basics of the story. And based on everybody's recommendations, I think this could be a good one. I know I just said I'm trying to go into it with no expectations, but it's really hard, guys, to have no expectations. Hopefully that will be a good mystery book that will check that box for me, though. I've been looking for so long. Next book I have on this list is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This book is a new release. It came out a couple months ago, and I had every intention of reading it a couple months ago until a couple people in the comments told me to wait until fall to read this book. And I see that one time and I'm a sucker for it. I'm like, yep, okay, I will wait until fall. I will wait until the atmosphere feels right to read a book, because I'm a seasonal reader. If somebody says a book is going to feel better in fall, I'm going to save it for fall. So I am excited to read this. This book has gotten really popular since it was released. Rachel Gillig also wrote One Dark Window, the duology, which still haven't finished. I have read One Dark Window, but I still haven't read Two Dark Crowns. I'm sorry. I'm going to read it. You know what? Let's add that to the TBR list as well. I'm going to read Two Dark Crowns this fall too. That One Dark Window really did feel like a great fall book. And so I feel like the second one would be great too. And then this one I've heard is great for fall as well. So maybe we're just gonna have a Rachel Gillig fall. So The Night and the Moth follows our main character, Sybil, who is a nun, basically, in simpler terms. She is a foundling that has spent the last 9 years of her life living in a cathedral and serving religion, essentially. But she has this skill as a diviner, which means that she has visions and can potentially see the future, or she kind of has like oracle powers. I don't know if it is exactly a one-to-one of this book versus how it's normally explained, but that's kind of how I'm interpreting it. And so she keeps receiving these visions of these 6 unearthly figures known as the omens, and then she can predict terrible things before they occur. So as she's coming to the end of her service as a nun, a mysterious knight arrives at the cathedral named Roderick, and he is described as rude, heretical, and devilishly handsome. And he has no respect for Sybil's visions. But then Sybil's fellow foundlings, diviners, nuns, whatever, they start to vanish. And she has no choice but to pair up with Roderick and try to solve this mystery of what's going on. I think it's a gothic fantasy, which is similar to One Dark Window. I think One Dark Window would be considered gothic fantasy as well. That feels very fall to me, kind of like the dark academia of fantasy when it goes more in the gothic realm. I think she has a friend that's like a gargoyle in this. I've just heard such good things about this. I think Rachel Gillig is very unique with her world building and her magic systems, because I think that fantasy books, new adult, young adult, just new fantasy in general, I think that they started to get a little bit formulaic and unoriginal, which is bound to happen the more books that are going to come out. But I remember thinking about One Dark Window that the magic system in particular was one of the most interesting and unique magic systems that I'd read about in a long time. So I have high expectations for this book, specifically just when it comes to the world building. I'm expecting this to be a really rich and interesting fantasy world, unlike anything I'd ever read before. Are those too high of expectations? I don't know. We're gonna find out. But I am excited to read this. All right, the next book that I have on this list is actually one that I bought this past weekend. I had a doctor's appointment this past weekend, and after the doctor's appointment, my husband took me to Barnes & Noble so that I could get a treat for doing so good at the doctor's appointment, and I ended up getting a couple of books. One of them was the book, Here we go. One of them was the Book of Lost Hours by Haley Gil Fuso. I'd never seen this book before. It was in the new fiction section. I picked it up because of the cover. And also the name, I think. I saw this, made an assumption that it was a fantasy book about books, and that is why I picked it up. That's the same thing that happened to me with The Book of Doors, which became one of my favorite fantasy novels ever. And so, not that I'm putting high expectations like this is going to be the next Book of Doors, but I am excited about this one after reading the synopsis. So this book takes place around this library that's filled with a bunch of books containing the memories of those who have passed and accessed only by specially made watches once handed down from father to son. But now the library and the books are mostly in the government's hands. So we follow our main character, Lisavette, who's 11 years old when we meet her, and she gets stuck in the library in 1938 and she can't get out. And so she grows up in the library surrounded by these books, able to read these books that are basically memories. And then we jump ahead, I guess we're in 1949, when an American spy named Ernest also gets stuck in the library. So now Lisavette is grown up. We're in 1949 now, so she would have been like in 22, 23 or so, and she meets Ernest, who's an American spy, and I'm hoping that there's a little bit of romance there. But I think the whole point of this plot is that they're really trying to keep these books out of the hands of the government because the government are trying to destroy them. We also have another timeline that's going on in 1965 when Amelia, who's another main character, this is so interesting. This is why I picked up this book. So Ernest gets stuck in the library in 1949. In 1965, 16-year-old Amelia is mourning the disappearance of her uncle Ernest when an enigmatic CIA agent approaches her to enlist her help in tracking down a book of memories her uncle had once sought. Perfect for fans of The Midnight Library and The Ministry of Time. Both 5-star books for me. I'm so excited about this book. I honestly might read this next. Or do I want to save it until it gets a little bit colder? I don't know. I'm really excited about this book. I might have too high of expectations. I'm trying to bring myself down to give it the best chance possible, but it just feels like it has everything that I want in a book. I'm really interested in it. It sounds unique and fun. I love a book about a book. Sounds like there could be some romance plots. There's government conspiracies. There's time travel. What more could you want at this point? So I'm really excited to read this. If anybody else has seen anything about this, let me know. I would be really interested in your thoughts. And then of course, no surprise, I also, in that same book trip where I bought the Book of Lost Hours, I bought Katabasis by R.F. Kuang too. This is a book that just released like 2, maybe 3 weeks ago-ish. It's R.F. Kuang's most recent release, and I'm super excited to read this one. I have been waiting for this release, to be honest. Even though I'm still kind of an R.F. Kuang newbie, I kind of have such respect and admiration for her writing style. I've read Yellowface and the Poppy War. I am planning on continuing with the Poppy War, and I really want to read Babel as well, or Babel. I don't know how everybody is saying it. I've said Babel in my mind, but recently I think I saw a video where R.F. Kuang herself was like, I say Babel, and I was like, whoa, that really shook my world for a second. I don't even know if I'm saying Katabasis correctly, but it's stuck now, so that's what it's gonna sound like. So I'm really, really excited about this. Also, the Barnes & Noble special edition with the edging on the pages, the stenciling, I really think is so pretty, and I love the cover. It's heavy. It's a really hefty book. I think that this is so cool. I think it's a little over 500 pages, but it doesn't feel like it could be 500 pages, or just looking at it, it doesn't look like it would be 500 pages. It's just so heavy, so I think the pages are really thin. So this is described as Dante's Inferno meets Susanna Clarke's Piranesi. I did not like Piranesi. Never read Dante's Inferno. Didn't like Piranesi. Katabasis is a noun in ancient Greek. It means the story of a hero's descent to the underworld. But our main character's name is Alice, and she has only had one goal: to be the brightest minds in the field of magic. And she wants to work with a specific professor, Professor Jacob Grimes at Cambridge, who is the greatest magician in the world. Jacob at one point dies. He dies in a magical accident that might be Alice's fault. And so now Jacob is in hell. And Alice is going after him because his letter of recommendation is key to her future. Alice teams up with her academic rival, whose name is Peter, and the two of them travel into hell to save this professor so that Alex can secure her future. It sounds a lot more lighthearted and kind of, I could be interpreting this totally wrong. It sounds kind of lighthearted and kind of funny, just the plot line of it in general. But even just some of, like, it's a hell of a story. Some of the tongue-in-cheek things that are being described about this book are cute. I just think it could be really interesting. I'm super excited to read this one. I think this could combine fantasy, dark academia. I'm hoping for a little bit of romance between Alice and Peter, but R.F. Kuang really likes to dangle that carrot. We never know what's going to happen with that one. Her writing is just so spectacular. I love her writing style. I think she is so freaking talented, and that's one of the main reasons that I'm really excited to read this. And also, out of all of her books that I've seen and haven't read or have read, the plot synopsis of this is the most interesting to me and really the most up my alley. So I'm super excited to dive into this. I know a lot of people have already read it. They read it within the first week that it came out, but I knew as soon as I saw the plot synopsis of this that I wanted to save it for fall, like true fall. So I'm super excited to read that and just cozy up and get taken on an insane journey through hell. I also have Watermoon on this list of books that I want to read in the fall. Watermoon is another one that came out earlier in this year. I think it came out in like February or March, and I was planning on reading it a lot earlier in the year, and everybody said wait until fall to read this book. And again, I'm a sucker for that. So I was like, yes, say no more. I will wait until fall. It's fall. So I'm really excited about this. I actually think that I'm going to make this my book club pick for the book club that I'm a part of. We basically take quarters to each pick a book. So I usually have the fall season where we read a book between September, October, November, and then somebody else takes December, January, February. Somebody has spring where you read a book in March, April, May, and then somebody has summer for June, July, August. So I usually fall in the autumn season, and I think I'm going to make this my book club pick. So this follows our main character, whose name is Hana. She inherits a pawn shop that not everybody can find. We're in Tokyo, and most people would just see a ramen shop if they're looking for this pawn shop. But if you know exactly where to look, you find this pawn shop where you can sell your deepest regrets and you can pawn off your life choices. So Hana inherits this pawn shop, and she wakes up on her first morning to find that it's been completely ransacked. And the shop's most precious acquisition was stolen, as well as her father missing. And then this charming stranger stumbles into the shop, and he offers her help instead of seeking it. Because I think most people that come into the shop are looking for help, get rid of their regrets, get rid of the life choices that they don't want to think about anymore. And so they want help from the pawn shop, but this guy stumbles in and is like, I can help you. Together, they journey through a mystical world to try and find Hana's father and the stolen acquisition by way of rain puddles, rides on paper cranes, the bridge between midnight and morning, and a night market in the clouds. It sounds so fun and sweet. I'm really excited about this. I don't know if this is going to fall exactly into the cozy fantasy genre, but it kind of feels like that Japanese translated healing fiction or Korean translated healing fiction combined with this cozy fantasy vibe. I'm so excited for this one. I have heard really good things about Watermoon, and I'm just looking for something that is easy, sweet, interesting enough to kind of keep you going through the book and keep that kind of momentum, but overall it's just like a really fun, sweet time. So I'm very excited for Watermoon. Again, everybody said to read this in the fall, so that is kind of why I've waited to read it for so long. I also have some books on this list that I don't own, but I'm very interested in reading. One of those is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. That book has been compared to a lot to If We Were Villains, which I read a couple years ago, and I really, really enjoyed that. The Secret History, honestly, they seem like really, really similar plots. Donna Tartt also wrote The Goldfinch, and I've just heard really, really good things about The Secret History. I also want to read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Alex Michaelides wrote The Silent Patient, he wrote The Fury, and I've read both of those books, but I haven't read The Maidens. The Maidens seems like the one that kind of stands out the most from his backlog of books. It's true dark academia, I've heard, and kind of follows a little bit of a different format than The Silent Patient or his other books may have. I don't know how true that is, but that's just kind of what I've heard about it. The Strength of the Few technically comes out in fall. It comes out early November, and so I don't know if I will make that a true fall book. I probably will, because as soon as it comes out, I'm just gonna want to devour it. So I'm so excited to read The Strength of the Few. It's the second book to The Will of the Many in the Hierarchy series, and I have been anticipating this release for so long. I know that at some point I'm going to want to read a witchy, cute, cheesy romance novel. Last year, the best one that I read was called The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. I remember being so surprised by how good the writing was in that, because I had kind of been on a string of really bad romance books with just terrible writing, and I was kind of expecting that with this one, but I just needed that itch to be scratched with like a fun witchy book that kind of feels like Halloween Town or Hocus Pocus or something. And I remember being like, whoa, actually the writing is really solid in this one. So The Ex-Hex is actually the beginning of a 3-book series, not one that necessarily all ties together, but follows a different couple in each one, kind of in the same town. So there's The Kiss Curse and The Wedding Witch, and I think that if I have the urge to read maybe like a witchy romance book again, I would definitely gravitate to those 2 books just because of how good I thought The Ex-Hex was. I wouldn't necessarily, I probably would go to Barnes & Noble and just browse the romance section and see if anything calls out to me, but specifically I think I would go with the intention of reading those books. I'm sure there are so many more books that I could put on this list, but I also have to be realistic with myself of what I'm actually going to be able to accomplish reading in fall. So those are some of the main titles that I'm really interested in. Of this list right now, the 2 books that I'm the most excited about, to be honest, is The Book of Lost Hours and The Spell Shop. That's just kind of the mood that I'm in currently. But I am excited to read all of these, and hopefully I will get through all of these within fall while still leaving maybe a little bit of room to do some mood reading if something else is calling out to me at the time. But I'm excited about this list, and I can't wait to read some of these titles. If you've read any of these or you're looking forward to reading some of these like I am, let me know in the comments. I hope that you have the best fall reading of all time. That is the best blessing that I can bestow upon somebody, that your fall reading season is perfect and cozy and it smells really good. So as always, thank you so much for joining and watching and hanging out with me on this little corner of the internet, and we'll see you next time.